Because
E
as people are coming in, they might be ending up in the waiting room. I'm not sure. So just keep an eye on
I'll
it.
keep
Yeah.
yeah, I'll keep
Okay.
an eye on it.
All right. Awesome. Hello, everyone. All right. We crossed 50-ish folks pretty quickly, and number continues climbing. So that's exciting. Exciting to see a good turnout today. I think, are we at time? Yeah, we are at time. So we'll go ahead and get started. This is being recorded, so you'll have an opportunity to receive the recording if you need to drop off or anything like that. I'm super excited to do this with Leland, specifically for law school. We do versions of this for MBA, etc. So happy to, if someone is outside of law, don't worry. While a lot of this is customized to law, we have, you can send us a note. We'll be happy to chat about non-law as well. Same thing, I've listed sort of a few statuses, US citizens, US permanent residents, and international students with a US cosigner. The certain parts of this presentation is tailored for folks that meet that description. If you don't, no worries. Again, send us a note. We're happy to chat with you one-on-one, help you better understand what options are and how they might be different from what you might hear about tonight. Okay, we like to have plenty of questions. In versions of this we've done as early as a few hours ago today. We've had 1:1, right? Like 60, right now I'm saying 60, 70 odd attendees, like literally 60, 70 odd questions. We are more than happy to answer all of those questions. We're happy to stay here as long as you need us to. Um, and if it overflows any reasonable time limit, we can certainly take things offline, share our calendars. You can meet with us one-on-one, and we can chat through any specific situation. Then certain questions we will reply by saying, hey, this is kind of very specific. We should chat one-on-one. All right, cool. Quick disclaimer, this is not, advice, etc. This is just educational information. What are we going to chat about today? So I'll give a brief intro on myself. Diego will give a brief intro on himself, and we'll talk about Juno as a company. Uh, the core part of getting your finances right during your law school careers is starting with budgeting and doing that right. So we'll talk about that for a few minutes, make sure everyone is on the same page with regarding to how to approach budgeting. Many of you may have never budgeted before. This is a really good time to start because it can be stressful on personal finances to go through, law, any grad degree. Um, Oftentimes that budgeting discussion leads to a gap, a funding gap, which very commonly is filled by things like student loans. So we'll dive into that. We'll share a little bit about what Juno does to ease the burden a little bit on student loans, and then we'll do Q&A for as long as we want. We're happy to do Q&A through the session as well. So as you're hearing something, if a question pops up in your mind, throw it in the chat. Diego is going to take point on answering some of those questions, either through chat or prompting me and say, hey, Nikhil, I think you should talk about this with the whole group, or Diego is extremely well qualified to just answer the question as well. So with that, quick intros. I can go first since my name is up there. So yeah, I went to U of I, did my aerospace engineering there, landed my pretty much my dream job at the time at Boeing. I was doing new airplane development there for 6 years. Got a bit bored, went to business school, and started Juno in the process of that. You'll hear more about Juno later. Diego?
Yeah, thank you, Nikhil. Good evening, everyone. I'm Diego. As you can see, I'm originally from Mexico. I went to school there, majored in economics. After that, I spent a few years doing investment banking before actually moving to the US. Like Nikhil, I guess I did my MBA at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business, and I've been with Juno ever since.
Awesome. We are lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so what's Juno, right? Juno is really group bargaining for student loans. That's how we like to summarize it. It started with these kind of casual messages where we said, hey, let's try to negotiate better student loan rates as a group. We were lucky that year we got to roughly 700 students, out of which 500 participated, ended up borrowing around $25 million of student loans at rates that were much better than the alternatives available at the time. The biggest alternative available at the time was the federal loans. And there's various ways to measure these things, but we've been able to deliver these kind of savings year on year for the last 7 years. And that sort of savings has driven Juno to become the top choice for students across numerous universities, especially amongst the business schools. It's not unusual to have 20-30% of an incoming class take their loans through Juno. We recently crossed $1 billion in student loan originations, so that was a fun milestone to hit. And we look forward to continuing this year over year and growing it. And this year, actually, JDs are a special focus for us because we realized a few things where we had by far the best product available, but we had no awareness amongst JD students. So we are set to change that, and I appreciate Leland in helping us get to that objective. Okay, so how Juno works, it's just, before Juno, you could go shop around everywhere, try to get a rate. With Juno, you can still go shop around everywhere, but we, as a community, negotiate rates that are better than what's available in the market, better than the federal loans, better than even what the lender offers on their own websites, right? So that's what we do, and it's just an option. At the end of the day, if you like it, you take it. If you don't like it, you don't take it. But we find that most students look at it and say, "Oh, wow, this is the best I was able to get anywhere," and end up using Juno. We've also we'll talk about Juno a little bit more later in terms of how we improve the student loan process, but there's much more that we've been able to unlock through this negotiation system. Okay, so budgeting, like I said, critical component to get right. You get this piece right, everything else tends to work out. You get this piece wrong in your last semester or in your second semester of your first year, you might have some stress, might have to make some adjustments to your lifestyle, things like that, and those can be difficult to make in the flow of things. So it is really important to get this piece right. Okay, so the first thing we say is do not follow the school's provided budget, right? So the school is really good at estimating, obviously, the money you pay to them, the tuition, the fees, stuff like that. They are guessing at the rest, right? There's no way that, Nikhil and Diego spend the same amount of money on living expenses, right? Their situations might be vastly different. One might have a kid, one might like to drink alcohol a lot, one might like to eat out a lot, one wants to live in a really fancy apartment with all the luxuries and no roommates, right? So the school takes an attempt at providing you with some numbers. We suggest you completely ignore those numbers. Those numbers have a purpose, and we'll talk about that later. But what we suggest is build your own estimate. If you go to juno.us/law-estimate, you get a quick spreadsheet to help you think through all the categories of expenses you're going to have. And we suggest, filling that out. So this is an example. Oops, there we go. This is an example of a budget someone has made, right? And you can see the things it takes into account, for example, internship income. If you're targeting big law and you're expecting to make, significant income during your internships, go ahead, add that in here, right? That will help you reduce what you estimate you'll need to borrow or get scholarships for, etc., right? This section is probably the most critical to think about. If you are a law student who's had a couple of years of experience in the work space, right? Like you're not coming directly in from your undergrad, it would be a good idea to maybe look at your spending over the last 12 months or so and say, okay, what's going to happen when I go to law school? Is this going to increase a little bit or is it going to stay the same? I would not suggest estimating that it decreases, right? Yeah, sure, rent might decrease depending on, the area you're moving from, but the rest of the stuff tends to either stay the same or go up a little bit, right? So even if you plan to spend less while you're in law school, don't budget for less, right? It's better to always have a budget that's a little bit conservative. You have a little bit extra cash at the end. That's not going to hurt you. You don't have cash, that's going to be a problem. So that's what you said. Now, this is a luxury, but we suggest, accounting for having some cash at graduation, right? I graduated in 2020. We all understand what the job market looks like today, depending on what you're targeting post law school. But there are instances when we graduate and there isn't a very strong job market, or there's some turbulence in the market, and it's going to take you a few months to settle in. And if you don't want to be too stressed in those months, it would be great to have some savings. Now, we fully understand that's a luxury. A lot of people are financing their entire cost of attendance. They don't have an emergency fund today, they're not going to graduate with an emergency fund, right? So um, it's a luxury, but if you have that luxury, we certainly encourage you to keep that buffer with you. Finally, one thing I'll share is a lot of times the numbers in the budget provided by the financial aid officers are for 9 months, not for 12 months. So just think about that, make the appropriate adjustments. Again, in this spreadsheet, we like to encourage you to think about, 34 months, right? So August to May of graduation, right? So that's close to 3 years, short by a couple of months. Diego, we have a typo over here. It says 24 for some reasons, but yeah. So that's how we generally encourage you to think about this, is to think about through graduation, what you're going to need to budget. Okay. So once you sort of conclude this exercise, you'll come up with like a funding gap, a loan need. If you have scholarships, etc., that's already being added into this spreadsheet right here. So really what's left over is typically student loans, or could be things like friends and family loans or asset-backed loans or other types of financing. For this discussion today in a broad setting, we'll keep it relatively narrow, focused on student loans. However, in one-on-one settings, we are more than happy to chat about, hey, does it make sense to borrow against these stocks I have? Does it make sense to borrow against this real estate I have? When does it make sense to take a student loan? Or when does it make sense to take a personal loan or other, loans from friends and families, things like that? We're happy to talk about it. The one thing I'll talk about is certain, if you're aiming for certain forgiveness programs, right? Whether it's a federal forgiveness program or a university-specific forgiveness program, then you really need to, make sure whatever you're doing aligns with that forgiveness program. For example, someone was going to take a student loan. They decided to take a loan from a family member instead, which is great because the family member said 0% interest rate, but the school did not allow them to use some forgiveness programs they have, some reimbursement programs they have, because that loan, did not look like a student loan. So there's things like that that you have to just keep in mind. Okay. So with that caveat, student loans. When we think about student loans, you want to figure out how much you want to borrow. So that's the exercise we just spoke about, the budgeting exercise. Then you want to figure out where you want to borrow from. That's really the toughest decision you have to make. And then the rest of it is sort of completing the process to get the funds from the place you decided you want to borrow from. I know it can be stressful to pinpoint, okay, this is exactly how much I want to borrow for a particular year or particular semester. But I wouldn't stress too much about it. At the end of the day, you should be able to increase the loan amount by essentially just repeating the process for how much ever extra you need. Oftentimes you can do this in the middle of the semester, in second, just pretty much at any point before graduation. You should be able to do this. There are some caveats and some limits I'll talk about in a second, but generally speaking, you should be able to do this. And then the second thing is to decrease the loan amount if it's already dispersed and like paid to the school, etc. Yeah, you can always prepay the loan amount so it doesn't continue accruing interest. In addition, depending on how far along you are in the process, you might even be able to just completely cancel the loan uh, as if you never even signed the documents. So depending on where you are, feel free to reach out to us, hello@joinjuno.com, and we'll guide you to the best way to either decrease or cancel any loans that you are taking. Okay. So now, just a few slides ago, I said, hey, the cost of attendance is a number that the school provides, but you might be spending more than that, right? And roughly, we estimate the median person in law school spends more than the cost of attendance. Now, the bad news is you can't borrow more than the cost of attendance minus any scholarships you're getting, right? So basically, scholarships plus student loans at most is the cost of attendance, right? And this is controlled by the financial office. There's no way to game it by saying, oh, I'll borrow a little bit from federal, a little bit from this lender, and a little bit from that lender, and somehow it will work out. It will not work out. All of those loans go through the financial aid office, and the financial aid office is the gatekeeper to ensure your borrowing plus scholarships is not more than the cost of attendance. That said, the number that you see on a website is not set in stone, right? You can always reach out to the financial aid office and say, hey, I need to borrow more than the cost of attendance published by the school because my needs are greater. And the arguments you typically make is, hey, I have a dependent, I need a laptop, my rent is actually X. These kind of arguments tend to work a little bit better than saying, hey, I need money for social events, traveling, things like that are not great arguments to make. So the perspective that the financial aid office often takes is, hey, is this expense needed for the student to have the full academic experience, right? Not the full social experience, not the full, the full academic experience. Can they graduate? Do they need this to graduate, right? That's sort of the test many financial aid offices will apply when you say, hey, I need the cost of attendance to be higher so that I can borrow a little bit more money. So just keep that in mind. If you're making an appeal like this, reach out to us. We are happy to help you make an appeal like this. Okay. So then the question becomes, where do I borrow from, right? And very often the federal loans are sort of the default choice. And we think that's a mistake, right? That's part of why we are here, part of what we've created. So this is how the federal loans look like this year. So 2024, right? So if people are borrowing for the 2024 to 2025 academic year, fall 2024, spring 2025, the first 20,500, they borrowed at a rate of 8.08% with a 1% origination fee. Anything above that, they borrowed at 9.08% and a 4.28% origination fee, right? Meanwhile, the folks taking a private student loan through Juno specifically, they can also borrow up to the cost of attendance. Depending on the credit score, something like 720, 730 plus, they were getting rates below, really below even the federal unsubsidized loans, almost always below the grad plus loans. And, right now, at least for, more than a majority of people below the unsubsidized loans, and there's no origination fee involved. So you can kind of look at the numbers. It's very easy to compare the numbers. We have a calculator on our website where you can plug in, your any private student loan quote and compare it against your federal loan alternative to understand what's the best mix for me to take. Should I take, all private? Should I take some federal, some private, etc.? But the answer often is from a cost perspective, the deals that Juno negotiates are often more affordable. However, that's not the entire equation because federal loans have public service loan forgiveness and income-driven repayment plans. And depending on what kind of a career you're planning to have post-graduation, you may want to ensure you're taking a federal loan and plan to use the public service loan forgiveness or an income-driven repayment plan. So I'm happy to chat more about either of these benefits, but generally they cater to folks who are, um, pursuing either a low income career or they have a period of low income in their career, right? Maybe after graduation, they're doing a few things for 2, 3 years where they don't make a lot of money, but they plan to make good money, 3, 4 years after graduation. That's when something like an income-driven repayment plan can be pretty helpful. And then public service loan forgiveness can be pretty helpful for a longer term public service career. So these are now, I will add that 2025 is an interesting year with the new administration. Some of these benefits may not exist or maybe diluted. So you will want to stay abreast of those changes. And certainly, Chris, my co-founder, he is probably the expert on keeping up with the public policy changes in this regard. So shoot us a note if you have any depth of a question over here. He knows exactly what's happening in the bills, etc. He's reading all of them, so he'll be able to guide us a little bit better in real time.
Nikhil, sorry to interrupt here. I think this is usually the slide where a lot of questions start popping up.
Yeah,
I
fire
guess
away.
a few things I think it's worth for us to touch base on here. First, there was someone in the audience asking about the benefit of using a cosigner. Probably we can talk about it here, and then there's a couple of other questions I want to raise for everyone to listen
Absolutely.
to.
So Juno is unique in the sense we negotiate keeping in mind that graduate students may not want to use a cosigner. In fact, about 65% or so of our members in 2024 took a loan without a cosigner, and the remaining, of course, used a cosigner. And that's uniquely a Juno thing, right? Like outside, if you go shop around, oftentimes you shop around without a cosigner, you either get extremely high rates or you just get declined. Versus at Juno, you're going to qualify for excellent rates. All the numbers I said, like below unsubsidized loans, etc., are often, I'm talking about folks without cosigners. Now, with cosigners, so often people ask me, hey, if I add a cosigner, is the rate going to reduce by X%? I can't tell you that, right? Basically, if you have a horrible rate and you have a great cosigner, your rate might improve by like 5%, right? Let's say you have a 655 credit score and you have a certain income mix or whatever. You might get a pretty horrible rate, right? Maybe 10%. And then you add a cosigner who has a 780 credit score and good income compared to the debts, suddenly that rate might drop to 7%, right? So versus if you already have a 730, 740 credit score, you're getting, 7.5. You add a cosigner that's 680 credit score and not great income compared to debts, your application might even get denied if that cosigner has like delinquencies and stuff like that, right? So it's highly variable, but we did a distribution. We tried to plot a distribution of people because a lot of people on Juno, they will check their rates with and without a cosigner. So we get to see like what's the delta. The median was pretty small. It was between 0.5% and 1%. I don't remember the exact number, but it was between 0.5% and 1%. And but the distribution was also very flat, right? That means it was not like a lot of people getting 0.5% and 1%. It was some people seeing pretty much no difference, some people seeing pretty big differences, and then somewhere in the middle, people seeing 0.5% to 1% differences. So that's the impact of a cosigner in a nutshell. What we've done is we've created what we've called a rate check experience, right? So what you can do is you can fill out this one form, hit submit, you'll see your rates, click the edit button, add the cosigner's information, hit submit, and you'll see your rates with the cosigner, without the cosigner. It's a soft credit check. It doesn't impact your cosigner or your credit report or your credit score. And then you just know the answer for yourself and you can see, is it worth adding the cosigner. Okay. So we can
Yeah.
share a link to our rate check tool. You'll see it. If you sign up, you'll see it, but it's extremely helpful in making that decision. Okay.
I guess one other important question that I think it's worth for us to touch base here is Leah is asking, if I have an existing federal student loan from undergrad, is it better to put it on deferment while in school or budget for it, continue to pay while she's in school?
It's hard to budget for it is what I would say, right? It's you're already going through, for the typical student, a phase of life where there's no income, there's a lot of expense. Then you add the undergrad expense on top of it. Oftentimes it's just hard to make the numbers work. So I guess the default answer would be most people are likely putting it on deferment. If you contact your loan servicer, they should be able to help you do that. And in some cases, it might help with your aid, right? Depending on which university you're going to, etc. You might get a little bit more aid by having those loans around. So it might not make sense to pay them off in case you have like a savings balance, you're thinking just to pay them off or something like that. It might not help to pay them off.
Yeah.
Okay.
This final question on this slide, I guess. Can you share more about the public service forgiveness plan? I guess what it is, and is it usually distributed by percentage or amount? I think there's a confusion between income-driven repayment plan and public service loan forgiveness.
Absolutely. Sitting in front of a bunch of to be lawyers, it's a very nervous position to be talking about things like public service loan forgiveness and income driven, just because there's a certain complexity to them, right? And they've gone through so many changes over time. Okay, so income driven repayment plan in a nutshell is a set of repayment plans that you can sign up with your loan servicer, and they do certain calculations based on the amount of income you're making and say, okay, this much might be your discretionary income and this much we're going to allocate towards your student loans, and only that much you need to pay each month, right? In all of the repayment plans, income-driven repayment plans available today, so that is all plans except the SAFE plan, which was recently, nixed. The interest continues to accrue, right? So even though you're making a smaller payment, the interest is accruing. So essentially what the repayment plan is allowing you to do is to delay making larger payments towards your loan until a time when you have a larger income. Okay, so that's why income-driven repayment plans are really popular, for example, with medical students who might go through a residency program when they're not making much money, especially compared to the debt that they've taken on. And then once they, graduate from the residency program, they're making enough money to start making full payments on their student loans. Public service loan forgiveness, again, sometimes popular amongst the medical community. And it might be, I don't have the data on this, but there's certainly a portion of the law community that also utilizes public service loan forgiveness. And essentially, if you have a long career, I think it's 10 years. And it's really based on the number of, I think they count the number of repayments that qualify, right? So if you make X number of payments, I think it's 120 payments that qualify for public service loan forgiveness. At the end of that, the balance on the loan is forgiven. Now you got to be careful with that because 120 payments usually pays off the whole loan, right? So the standard repayment plan on a federal loan is a 10-year loan term, which means 120 payments. So really, it's often used in conjunction with the income-driven repayment plan, which will extend the number of payments needed to pay off the loan. And so you'll make 120 payments that are smaller than the normal payment amount. And then at the end of those 120 payments, you'll get your public service loan forgiveness. You have to work in certain, either nonprofit, certain nonprofits or certain employment directly by the government, etc., to be able to be eligible for these, for the public service loan forgiveness. Does that answer the question? And we can certainly send you a couple of articles on studentaid.gov that are actually extremely useful on this. There is some controversies around the public service loan forgiveness because the forgiveness may or may not be taxable. So that itself presents a challenge because if you have a increasing balance and then that big balance gets wiped to zero, but now you suddenly have a big in a single year you have to pay 20-30% of that forgiven balance to the IRS. That could be a very, very stressful financial event. So it's kind of weird, but a forgiveness could be detrimental to your finances. But just have to be a little bit careful with that. But there is legislative attention to that problem.
Yep, I think, I mean, at least to me, the answer was clear. I just asked the person who asked the question if it was clear enough for them. I guess we can continue.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we've kind of made the decision tree clear, right? The way we like to think about it is, do you need the features that are unique to federal loans, which is public service, loan forgiveness, income-driven repayment plans? If so, you're very likely going to take the federal loan, right? And then if you don't need that, look at which one is cheaper, right? And then pick that one. And this, juno.us/grad-calculator will help you understand which one is more affordable because the federal loans have these origination fees. So the true, cost is higher than these numbers suggest here. And to be honest, though, if you're a Juno member, you're often getting rates below even this interest rate. So you don't even need the calculator. You just look at the two interest rates and you're like, oh, this is cheaper. So that's what I'm going to take. So that's sort of the decision tree many people go through. Okay, I'll skip this slide because we have a whole calculator that just does the math for you. But it's just a mental math way of thinking about what's the cost of the 4.2% origination fee on the plus federal loans. Okay. Yeah. Timeline. Yeah. So this is important to understand because I think it alleviates stress for a lot of people. If you've taken undergrad loans, you might already be familiar with this. Doesn't hurt to reiterate it. So let's say, August 2025, you enroll in your fall semester as a 1L. Your first loan gets dispersed during these 34 months. There'll be multiple disbursements, usually one each semester. That's pretty much how most, if not all, universities do it. And then you'll come to graduation. And during all of this time, most people are selecting what's called a deferred repayment plan, which is the default with the federal loans, and the most common selection with the private loans. And so if you select a deferred repayment plan, you're really not making any payments during this time when you're in school. And that extends to 6 to 9 months after school. 6 months for the federal loans, between 6 and 9 months, depending on which private lender you're going with. So that's kind of the relief on making payments. Now, during all of this time, interest is accruing. That's the case for the federal loans. That's the case for private loans. I do not know of any loan available to graduate students where the interest does not accrue. If you Google and you find some loan that says the interest is not accruing, 99.99%, it's either a scam or it's talking about direct subsidized loans only available to undergraduate students who qualify for that, and the amounts are capped at like a few $1,000s. So basically, it's irrelevant for anyone going to law school. Okay. After this deferment period, the full repayment begins. So this is when you make sort of 120 equal monthly payments until the loan is paid off. Now, 10 years, it doesn't have to be 10 years, right? Many times people finish this off in 6 years. That's a common number I hear. It's you basically, if you want to pay more, you can, and that will reduce the interest that's accruing each month, and that will in turn reduce how long it takes for you to pay off the loan. So that's kind of, and there's no penalties, right? Basically, with federal loans and most private student loans, there's no penalties for making early payments. What else should I say about this? Yeah, so there's also, when you sign up for the loan itself, the federal loan has a default of 10 years, but you can choose an alternate repayment plan if you'd like with private loans. So you can go 5 years, you can go 15 years, 20 years, 12 years. There's all sorts of options on how long you want to take. Generally speaking, though, the 10-year tends to be pretty popular. When do people take longer terms? It's if you have a really high balance and you feel the monthly payment is starting to look really, really big, you might take a longer term. Oftentimes, though, it comes with a slightly higher interest rate, right? So there's a trade-off in like, okay, I have a low monthly payment, but my interest rate is now a little bit higher. So that's something for everyone to think about when you're, making a decision of taking a longer term. Okay, now there are people in different situations that takes some different repayment plans. For example, a fixed repayment plan is very similar to deferred, except during this deferment period, you're paying something like $25 a month or $50 a month. Interest only is you're basically paying off the interest that's accruing each month while you're in the deferment period, and then full repayment begins. And lastly, immediate repayment plan means you're saying, I don't want a deferment period. I'm just gonna, make principal and interest payments right from the get-go. Like I take the loan today, 1 month later, I'm making P&I payments, more similar to a personal loan. Only it's usually when someone other than the student is paying the loan, this like a spouse or a parent or someone else is paying the loan, someone who's generating an income, then the immediate repayment plan might make sense. Okay, so here's something interesting about what happens in the industry. Harvard Law School negotiates private loan rates for their students, right? So what you can see is the numbers from the previous slide. The blue is the grad plus rate in 2023. This blue is the grad plus rate in 2024, and how that compares to the rate the Harvard Law School was able to negotiate for its students, right? So, 6%, basically 2% difference from the, 8%. And in this case, 1.5% difference from the 9% grad plus loan. And of course, these grad plus loans had origination fees. These red bars did not have origination fees, right? And 2% or 1.5% can seem like a small number to some people, but it's really not, right? When you calculate the delta in savings for a $60,000 loan, right? It's by the end of the loan, you might be paying around 115,000 or 124,000 last year. Over the 10-year period plus the deferment window, all of that, you pay 124,000 for borrowing just 60,000, right? Versus if your rate was 7.5, you paid 106,000. And so you're basically saving $17,000, $18,000 over the life of the loan. So that's certainly a number of assumptions baked into this, but it gives you an idea of, the value of trying to reduce that interest rate. And it's kind of cool that Howard Law School goes and does this, right? Unfortunately, they seem to be the only one that does it, right? No one, we've not come across other financial aid offices that go into this, right? Some financial aid offices will do something like this for international students, where they try to find a lender that's willing to make loans to their international students. Domestic students are largely left with either federal loan options or finding private loan options by themselves, nothing specifically negotiated for them. That's sort of where, and you can kind of see the impact of that, right? This is weirdly flipped, but this blue bar is now the private loans, and the red bar is the federal loans. But you can see the students at HLS are borrowing more through private loans than federal loans, right? So, obviously the lower interest rate is attractive. And even despite some of the features we discussed earlier, the public service loan forgiveness and the income-driven repayment plans, a lot of people, well, a majority of people are graduating towards the private loans, right? Now, most schools do not run this process, right? And in fact, even at HLS, Juno has been able to negotiate a better option for students than what the financial aid office negotiated. Um, so that's really where Juno comes in. We do this negotiation group on behalf of law students all over the country. Now through April 30th, you, your classmates, your friends, all applying to law school, all getting into law school are signing up. Um, we are going to lenders and trying to get them to bid to give us the lowest rates and the best terms, the lowest rates they will for the group. I want to clarify that it's not one rate for every person in the group, right? It's still credit based, but the rates are lower than what you get if you went directly to the lender. You know, we are looking at it to make sure it's better than what you could get from the federal loans or really any other alternative. So someone who's already getting a low rate because they have a really high credit score, etc., are going to get an even lower rate. Someone's getting a high rate today from other places, they're going to get a lower rate than that higher rate, right? But there's no cross subsidizing. The 800 plus credit score person is not going to get a worse rate so that the 700 credit score person can get a better rate. There's no cross subsidizing happening in that way. Yeah, and ultimately it's signing up for Juno is like a mailing list, really, right? There's no obligation to like take the loan we negotiate or even apply for the loan we negotiate. It's just we show our strength in numbers by through the demonstration is signing up. We use the demonstration to get lenders to bid. And then once the offer is made available to you, you can choose to use it, not use it, ignore it, delete us, unsubscribe us, whatever you'd like. Um, so right now we have 150 law students. I bet that number has grown to 200 as of the event we did this morning, Diego. So we should update the slide, but this is growing. This number is growing quickly. For context on the business side, Diego, do you have the numbers for the grad population as a whole?
It's closing up to 5,000 by now.
It's closing up to 5,000. Yeah. So we are excited to grow our law school audience. The overall grad volume is upwards of $100 million and growing. Yeah. Okay. So for 2025, we want to get a big discount compared to whatever rates you can get by yourself compared to the federal loan options. Of course, we want to make sure zero fees, no application fees, no origination fees, no fee, right? One unique thing that makes Juno stand out in the industry is our rate match guarantee. And oftentimes when we hear the word guarantee, we have like a averse reaction to it. It's like, oh, that's a scam. The rate match guarantee is not a scam, right? Basically what it says is if you are able to find a lower rate outside of Juno, bring it to us. We will get the lender we are working with to match the rate that you found somewhere else. Plus, we'll cut you a check for 1% of the loan amount. Essentially, it makes it impossible for you to find something better anywhere else. On top of that, we make the process extremely easy. Let's say you found a better rate somewhere else. Me, Diego, anyone on our member happiness team will hop on a Zoom call with you, try to knock out the, gathering the evidence basically of that other better rate that you found. Make sure it's apples to apples within roughly 24 to 48 hours. Everything is done. There's not a long process. There's not, thousands of emails. It's just send us a quick form. You can send it via email. We have a form you can upload it to, etc. And we go do all paperwork from there, make sure the lender approves, the newer rate, and then send you an email saying, hey, you can sign the loan docs with the updated rates. And then if you sign the loan docs, we send you a check. So it's a real guarantee is what I'm trying to say, right? It's not some advertising material. Okay. And it's no skin off our back, right? I'll add that. Like a lot of times when someone's giving a guarantee or like having to pay out on a guarantee, they are losing money. So they feel like, oh, this is, I don't want to, they have this like friction, right? They add false friction to it. That's not the case over here, right? Juno has no incentive to deny you the rate match, right? In fact, we have every incentive to make that rate match successful so that we have strong volume so that next year we can go back to the lenders and be like, hey, da da da. Okay. I'll stop over there. And okay, last thing I'll add, sorry, I'm really proud of our rate match guarantee. We in previous years, we've also had penalizing terms for the lender if too many people are using our rate match guarantee, right? Which is like, hey, if you're not offering the best rates from the get-go, that's a problem. We're going to penalize you. And yeah, and basically encourage them to ensure that not many people even have to use the rate match guarantee to begin with. So what can you do? Yeah, go join the group, tell your friends about it. That's the number one way people find out about Juno. Juno doesn't have insane marketing budgets. Part of the reason we are able to negotiate lower rates is because we take much, much lower marketing fees than most other people in the space. Yeah, and yeah, oh, isn't there a scholarship? What's a scholarship?
Yeah, there's a scholarship that will be given away, randomly at the end of the negotiations to whoever signs up and it's part of the group. It's going to be a 2K scholarship. So yeah, I guess sign up as soon as possible. Join our group.
Awesome. All right. What questions do we have?
I don't see any outstanding questions on the chat. So if anyone has any questions, please drop them in the chat. We'll be happy to stay on the line with you all. We still have like a few minutes left from the time we had booked. Yes, sorry, we do have a $500 scholarship for people who attended this webinar. That one, yeah. Sorry, my bad, Nikhil. Thank you for reminding me of that. We also have a Juno webinar. A Juno scholarship, right? But that's separate from I guess what we're going to be giving out right now. So I guess, Nikhil, how do you want to handle it? Do you want to pick a random person in the audience?
Oh, we're literally just picking like that. I guess.
There you go. There's Itzel, showing her face.
Okay. I'm good with that.
All right. Let me do this.
No, I think that's fair. Yeah. Itzel, congratulations. You're the winner of the $500 Leland Juno scholarship. We will get in touch with you to actually disperse the funds. We were obviously very well prepared for this section of the webinar, but first time we're doing this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I actually do have a question. So once we fill out the form and we figure out our numbers with the school and we do decide to take out a Juno loan, do you guys just pay the school directly or how does that work? Sorry, I'm like first gen, so I don't know how this.
No, this 10th gen also has the same question. So totally understand. So student loans specifically, that's exactly how it works. The lender will send the funds directly to the school's financial aid office, and that will show up as a credit on your bill. So you'll see, I owe the school $50,000, and let's say you borrow $80,000 because you might be borrowing for living expenses too. So I have paid the school through the loan $80,000, and now the school owes me $30,000 as the refund. And the school will put in your checking account the delta, the $30,000 for living expenses. And this all usually happens around the start of the school semester. The exact date depends on your financial aid office. It does not depend on when you apply. It just depends on your financial aid office. So your financial aid office controls what's known as the disbursement date. And the lender basically sits there waiting to send the money to the school until the disbursement date. And then the school will typically give you any funds for living expenses within 1 or 2 weeks after the disbursement date.
Okay, so you guys are in contact with the financial aid, or am I like in charge of like the middleman, like they
You're
said.
not the
Okay,
middleman. You're not the middleman.
alrighty.
Yeah. So when you sign the loan, it's called a certification request. So the lender will reach out to the reason why I say the lender and not me is because Juno is not a lender, right? Juno just negotiates with lenders on behalf of students to get cheaper rates. But the lender will reach out to the school through a electronic process. I make it sound like a phone call, but it's just a automatic system that they have. They'll send what's called a certification request. That certification request is asking the school to confirm that A, you're enrolled in the school, B, that you're not borrowing more than the cost of attendance, and then C, what is the disbursement schedule. And the reason I say schedule and not date is because typically you're borrowing for a whole year at a time, and the school will break up the disbursements into one semester at a time or one quarter at a time. So the school will send the lender a schedule saying, on X date, send me 20% of the loan, on Y date, send me 30% of the loan, on Z date, send me whatever percentage of the loan. So that comes from the school's financial aid office. Typically, it's just equal portions every semester, 50% fall, 50% spring.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Tel, for your email. Nikhil, we have one question here. If I don't plan on attending law school in a few years, what are some ways to start thinking about future debt now?
Avoidance, that's probably the best way to, I mean, that's a general personal finance question. I think it's a good idea to try to prioritize goals, right? Especially if it's a few years out. I think the big goal that a lot of people battle with, especially when they're later in their careers, is home ownership and avoiding student loans, I guess I'll say is the right way to phrase that. And my sense of it has been, especially in recent times, the home ownership goal almost takes precedence when you think of it from a, call it a 20-year perspective. Now, not everyone has the luxury of thinking of it from a 20-year perspective, right? But if you're in that position where you have a good income, strong income prior to law school for a number of years, you might choose to prioritize home ownership, especially if you are in a situation where you feel like, oh, this is going to be my home. I am going to settle down in California, once it's all done, etc. And you're not prone to incurring multiple transaction costs in real estate, right? The buying and selling costs. It might make a lot of sense to prioritize home ownership over like something like, let me get a big savings account so that I don't have to borrow money for law school. There are certain things you can do to save money on taxes, depending on your state and things like that. There's 529 plans. I'm honestly not an expert on those things, but if you are planning ahead, you would want to connect with an accountant, say, hey, if I'm going to do this, it is a two-sided coin, because a lot of times, funds, especially earmarked for education, might reduce the amount of aid you might get, right? So your scholarships or your merit-based aid or need-based aid might be less because you saved for school, which is kind of a weird concept, right? Why are you being penalized for saving for school? But that is just one of the factors that the schools consider when determining, which students get how much aid, etc.
Awesome. There's one question here. It's a little bit technical. How does it work if there is a public health crisis, example given COVID, and if they make a federal decree to defer student loans? Will Juno loans fall under that? I guess we need to clarify. First, Juno is not a lender, and then that's
Yeah,
the
so
federal side.
Juno is not a lender, but the lenders that participate on Juno are all private lenders, right? And in the last instance of this, during COVID and all the extensions that happened after COVID, the private loan industry was not impacted, right? Like a federal policy is not going to change, well, has historically not changed whether students have to continue making payments on private student loans. That being said, the lenders themselves might have their own policies on, if you call them up and say, hey, I don't have a job anymore, can I stop making payments for the next 6 months? They might say yes, right? So yeah, so the federal policies have not historically impacted. We do not expect in the future that they will impact, the effective pause on student loans and things like that. Yeah, but again, if students end up in a challenging financial situation and loan payments are due, we strongly recommend not like burying your head in the sand, but communicating with the loan servicer. They often have options to help you tide over, short-term and unemployment situations and things like that, because they don't want to default on their books either, right? So they'll help you out. The most common discussion is forbearance, something like, a few months at a time, reviewed up to 12 months. Those kind of policies are not unusual at all.
Yeah, there's Itzel, I think she was one asking about if they don't know which school they're gonna be heading into later this fall, can they join the group? The answer is yes, absolutely.
Yeah, do select JD because we are closely tracking, JDs. But yeah, you can just say, I don't know for university, or skip that question, however it's presented. And that's fine. Lot of people join, they've been admitted to 2-3 universities. They're still deciding which one they want to go to. They join Juno, or they've applied to 6-7 universities and they, not sure which one they even will get into. They'll sign up, they'll just pick their topic. The information you give to Juno at this stage is largely directional, right? When you apply for your loan, you'll want to make sure you very precisely give the exact university that you're applying for, because that's the financial aid office that the lender will get in touch with. But to join Juno, it's fine.
I don't see any more questions here. I don't know if Amanda from Leland, are you still around?
Yes, I am here. If y'all are done with questions, we can go ahead and wrap up. But thank you both so much for hosting tonight. We really, really appreciate it, and really excited we could have this material today to our attendees.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining.